Hi, Joel. Welcome
Hi,
to this
thank you.
video interview. It's really nice to be talking to you after attending your live stream on Saturday. I will start with acknowledging that this interview is taking place on the unceded lands of the Kulin Nations, and I would like to acknowledge and pay my respects to the elders, past, present, and emerging. Joel, welcome to this chat. Thank you for having me at the live stream, the Takeover live stream on Saturday, the 22nd of August, where you spoke about your new work, which is called, you have to correct my pronunciation if I'm wrong here, but Giraru Galing Ganhagirri. Is that
That was really good. Yeah, yep. Giraru Galing Ganhagirri. Pretty much spot on.
Ganhagirri?
Yeah.
Cool. It's such a beautiful name. You mentioned about the alliteration and just so the meaning of this phrase is the wind will bring the rain. Is that
Yep.
right? How did you
Exactly.
so what do each of these words mean, like individually?
Uh, um, um, like galing means like to follow. So the wind will bring the rain. The wind. So it's like giraru, like literally wind bringing rain. Like literally, yeah. Giraru wind, galing bring ganhagiri means the rain. Or it kind of means like a storm. Yeah.
Oh wow, wow. Okay, cool. I really I love the idea, the immediate visual imagery of the wind will bring the rain. Like you can't hear this name and not immediately have your imagination activated. So that's really beautiful. You
It was
mentioned that.
the I came across the phrase when I in my previous work called Daddy.
Yeah.
And there's a scene where I sit down and I pick up my mobile phone and I try and teach myself my language through this Wiradjuri language app. And Giraru Galing Ganhagirri was one of the phrases that I chose in that scene. And it always just stuck with me. It has a kind of poetry to it that I really like. And then, so when I was thinking about what I wanted to make for Takeover, this kind of phrase kept popping up in my thoughts. So I figured I would go with that.
That's so beautiful. That scene that you just mentioned, it's actually one of my favorite scenes from that show because I remember I attended it at the Arts House last year, was it? And
Yep.
and
Yep.
that's so powerful to me because even just oh, the whole scene was so powerful. It was, I'm really excited to hear that that's where the idea came from for this one.
Yeah.
Speaking of your previous works and this one, you mentioned that normally you've tended to take on big issues, and this year it's kind of like a whole big issue in itself, and so you're changing focus and focusing on something that gives you solace and meditating on the nature of country and the cycles of nature. Um, so can you tell us a little bit more about the shift in the topic that you've chosen? It came across to me as a bit of like balance. There's always a bit of contrast. So when people are a bit relaxed and not thinking about big things, your work says, hey, what about these big things? And then when everyone's really overwhelmed, your work is like, hey, what about these calming things? Is that?
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I mean, I think first and foremost, it might be a bit of personal self-care there, you know, like I think when the pandemic hit, I probably like a lot of people started to obsessively, you know, listen to the Corona cast on the ABC and look at the graphs every day. And I kind of became a bit obsessed with it. And that combined with not being able to see friends and going out, I kind of got into a bit of a stuck place. And so then when it came to thinking about the kind of work I wanted to make, it didn't feel, I didn't feel like I had the personal emotional resources to be able to dive into, you know, I don't know, to, you know, like I found like with the Black Lives Matter, you know, I found it really, I found it kind of hard to engage with that moment in history just because it all just felt so big. So I think this desire, and one of the things actually this it's been something I've been thinking about since before the pandemic. It's been in reply um, uh, to the climate change crisis that we're facing. And one of the things, like I've been engaged in the activism around climate change for sure, but in order to avoid getting fatalistic and becoming despondent with the lack of action on climate change, I found some succor, some solace in reminding myself that actually country, the earth, and the cycles of nature are enduring and ancient and have been going for long before we were here, and they'll continue long past when we've been forgotten. So that kind of zooming out is something that I do that helps me cope with everything that's happening. And so I figured it might be nice to share that idea with the audience at a moment in history when we do need some solace and some succor. That doesn't mean we don't continue fighting for the things that are important, but if we just fight and don't also take moments to be kind to ourselves, then we'll burn out.
Absolutely. And just from what I've seen so far, it's got such a quality to it that I really think I'm really looking forward to seeing more of this work. And it feels like the kind of work that really feeds your soul. And
yeah, I think that's the idea. Yeah.
Great. There was one more thing that stood out to me about, you said that during lockdown, it's been really hard not being able to go up to your own country and to see the storms coming from Wiradjuri country down to here and feeling the rain and knowing this is the rain that came from your country. What's that been like? What does that feel like for you?
That's been, and in fact, the music that Daniel Nixon has made, he strategically went and did a field recording of a storm that came down. It started, I think, we were watching the kind of meteorological maps together in the lead up to when we knew this storm was coming, and it came down from the North New South Wales coast and then swung exactly through the southern part of Wiradjuri country and then came down across the Murray and hit us. So yeah, like I think also there has been, again, this is something that I've always done. Like, you know, if I know that storm has come from my country, I'll go and stand in it for a moment because that's water that is from you know, where my ancestors are from, and it connects me to them in this really kind of very visceral way. So yeah, that's definitely a part of it as well.
It's absolutely beautiful. I think it just makes the experience of the show so much richer, knowing that all these elements have gone into it and into the creation of it, and there's so much meaning in even the sound of the rain that we hear in the film. So
yeah, and I think it's really important as a culture, as we're becoming more and more stuck in our different bubbles, to remember that we are all connected. You know, that moisture that I sweat out is something that I drank, that was rain that fell, that was evaporated from somewhere else, and that actually, you know, the cycle of water and air and the elements and everything, actually all human beings and all living things and all unliving things are all connected. At some point, you know, science can prove that beyond any doubt. And I think the more we remind ourselves of that, the more it's going to empower us to recognize that we need to honor that interconnectedness as well.
Absolutely, so beautiful. These are such wonderful things to think about, such grounding thoughts that really help us to remove our perspective from what's stressing us out in this moment, and just know it's bigger than our current anxiety. Right. Yeah, cool.
Right.
So when you've got these beautiful big thoughts, these big ideas, and then you look at the medium that we've got here, which is we're locked down, you're doing things via Zoom, you're now using film, which is not your usual medium. You're usually into live performance, and now you're finding yourself boxed in, not only in the physical space that you're locked down in, but also in the frame. that you are now creating and presenting your work in. How does that feel in terms of the contrast, in terms of bringing your work into this space?
Well, when I make work, this is actually a process that I use. I film myself improvising, and then I'll review that footage and I'll clip out bits and pieces. So kind of what I shared, maybe not so much the final video, but the moments before where I shared kind of like just clips of me dancing. That's a process that I use to generate material anyway. So yeah, I remember when we first went into lockdown, and there was this kind of for artists, there was this kind of buzz that was going around, and we were being called on to pivot and to be resilient and to adapt. And it was, I remember being quite stressed by it, just kind of going, whoa, 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 like, you know, like film and broadcast are art forms in and of themselves that people are very, very skilled at, you know, like in an online world where there's, you know, Netflix and HBO and Disney and, you know, and as well as amazing visual artists and people who work, this is their medium, like what do I have to offer, you know, like, you know, especially because film is normally big budget, right? You know, there's a reason why that, because you need a big team and expensive equipment and software and all the rest of it. Nonetheless, at some point I kind of decided to suck it up and have a try at it, and it really is. It's me playing. I don't imagine the end result will be a, you know, Cannes award-winning film or anything, but I think it'll be interesting for people to share, for people to, for me to share with people this kind of like exploration of a medium that's a little bit different for me. And there was this nice in the chat on Saturday. There was this one woman who saying that it reminded her, the little sketch of a film that I made reminded her of the feminist artists in the 70s who turned to film, but they didn't actually have any resources. So it had that kind of rough and ready kind of raw vibe to it. So that was nice. I liked that response. I thought, oh, that's cool. That's a kind of a heritage or a legacy that I would be quite happy to be associated with. Yeah.
Beautiful. I did like how you said towards the end of the Saturday, the show then, you were saying how you're a bit of a technophobe and a bit of a Luddite is the words you used to describe yourself. And you said that you like things being lo-fi and just more personal. And I've felt this in your shows as well. So you normally have your audience very in an intimate space with you, very present, very you know, right there. And they're often moving around in the space with you. You're taking them on this journey that is very, very personal. And I was wondering how you feel about that sort of experience in this medium, because I noticed in your film, which we'll be talking more about shortly, you did have moments where your body was far more intimate and moments where you were more zoomed out, and there were different focuses. And so I did feel that there's a sense in which your style translates a little bit in this medium as well, in the sense of how you're taking your audience along. How do you feel about that? Do you feel in what ways is this medium freeing for that sort of thing? In what ways is it restricting? How does that feel to you?
Mm. Yeah, I think think that's a really great observation, actually. I am interested in distance and proximity. So in my normal work, which is a kind of promenade style, I'll deliberately choose to come into the middle of the audience. You know, there's one moment in Daddy where I'm kind of staggering and falling, and I actually deliberately zigzag my way dangerously through the audience. And then I might choose later to engineer it in such a way that I'm in a far corner and everyone is watching me from quite afar. So that playing with distance and proximity is really important. And then it kind of occurred to me, you know, as there was a funny like changing of hats that I had to do from choreographer to filmmaker. I'm not going to call myself a filmmaker, but someone who's at this moment making a film, right? That I kind of had to kept on having these moments of like, oh no, hang on, this is film. I can actually literally, I can exaggerate that and go all the way in, and we could watch a single bead of sweat like roll down, in a square inch of flesh, which in a way is something that I would love to be able to do in live theater if I could make that. And in fact, sometimes I do, like I'll use screens and cameras in my live performance in order to be able to really direct the gaze of the audience. So that's something. And then the other thing in terms of the eventual work, the eventual presentation of the work, I think will be returning to a live immersive experience of the way when I install the work. I'm not quite there yet. I'm going to make the film first, and then, but I have this, and I don't know what this means yet. I haven't kind of fleshed it out, but I think maybe I'm going to like make the film, and then I might disassemble the film somehow for the installation of the presentation. So kind of like building a car and then pulling it apart for its spare parts or something. Yeah.
That's fascinating. Thank you for sharing that. I did also like one thing that you said about curating how your body looks from one vantage point when you're doing this work in this way. And that was something that stood out as a contrast as well in your promenade style immersive work. Everyone's really looking at you from different angles. There's a much more, I guess, 3D experience, but also like, people are experiencing it differently. Whereas here, I suppose you've got both sides. You've got more control over how you design the audience experience, but also if you are eventually going to have an immersive version of this work as well, then there's just a lot of possibilities to play with, I guess.
Yeah, I think I'm not thrilled about the idea of being locked to this 2D space that is a screen. Or at least I'd like to find a way to fuck with that, to queer it, to dismantle it somehow. Yeah, I think, yeah.
It sounds fascinating. About the process of creating your work, I noticed you said at one point that it was you found it difficult to be creative in your house. Like you find it easy to be productive, but creativity is a different thing. And what's your ideal sort of space which really unlocks your creativity? What would your ideal?
A studio. Yeah, I love a studio, and in particular, I think I realized, because I make solo work, so actually often I'm in a studio on my own. But now I realize actually how important it was for me to go to class with other dancers in the morning as a way of, like leaving the house, leaving behind the emails and the chores and the bills and all that stuff, and going into a space where I get into my body and get into my imagination with other people who are doing the same thing. Now that I don't have that, I realize actually how important that is to my process. So it's maybe not even so much a space, but more a kind of a proximity to other and an interaction with other people. Dancers are really special. They're really special people. And I don't think I think I took them for granted a little bit. So there's something about walking in to a studio and flopping yourself on the floor and massaging your feet and starting to stretch and warm up while you chat with these other artists, and you kind of organically talk about what you've been doing and what interests you, and even before the formal class has started, you're shifting yourself into this creative space. So I think, yeah, I love the studio. I miss the studio. I think having that as a separate space, and it doesn't even matter, it could be the crappiest basement little thing, or it could be the most glorious Australian ballet with a vista kind of studio. It doesn't matter, but being able to leave the mundane and go into this place that maybe is a little bit, it's also, it's kind of, without getting too esoteric, it's kind of a sacred space as well. You take your shoes off before you step in there. There's a respect for it. There's a certain way that you respond to that place, and leaving your home and the office to go to that place is an important thing for finding your creativity, I think. So I'm really, really looking forward when we get to go back to the studio.
That I think a lot of people are looking to get back to where they feel comfortable and able to create in a way, in their own home. Yeah, cool. About your process of developing work, you use an improvisation methodology that you've developed, which is called enroute. And one of the main differences you said between the way you create work and the general way of creating is your work is a more intuitive and improvised rather than learned movements to like set to a beat. It's more about like the textures in your body, the states. Can you tell us more about that, because I'm ruining it?
Yeah. I mean, I definitely wouldn't say that. I would say a lot of artists, dance artists, are working in some version of this manner. I'm definitely not unique in that way. I think improvisation is, and there are a lot of artists who I would say they're improvisation dance artists. They're interested in improvisation as a performative tool in and of itself. I'm not exactly that, because I do kind of arrive at something that if you came and saw 4 shows of Daddy, the choreography would look more or less the same, but it's not that I've arrived at it through an improvisation. And that methodology enroute, do you want to talk maybe a little bit about where it came from?
Yeah.
Because I didn't really go into it in detail. So it started back in 2015. Bernadette Lewis, who was my flatmate, my best mate, and my muse when we were studying at WAPA together. She and I started a residency, and we started from the observation that, funny talking about the studio, when we step into the studio, we would tend to move habitually in response to the studio. It was hard to break your habits and find a new way of moving. So we decided to, and we're like total city kids, right? So we decided to go on a 3-day trek, and we hiked through, and we specifically chose a route that took us through different terrains, so up and down hills and beaches and rocks and forest, and it was quite arduous, and we challenged ourselves with this, and then we planned to go, and then we went into the studio the 4th day, like straight after we'd done this. And so we went on this trek, and we talked and we danced, and if we saw those dunes and we had the instinct, we went and rolled down them, and we kind of observed our own bodies and our own imaginations as we moved across these different terrains. And then we went into the studio, and we tried to continue to move in response to the memory of that experience. So that's one of the reasons why we call it enroute, because it's about the journey. And one of the things that we became really interested in was the way that the texture of your body changed. So when you're walking across sand, the texture of your body becomes quite heavy, as it kind of has to counteract the softness of the sand. Alternatively, when you're picking your way through rocks, you soften your body and you become quite agile, and so we thought that there was an interesting relationship there between the tone or the texture of your body and the terrain. So we thought, well, maybe you could activate that imaginatively. So instead of actually having to walk across sand or across rocks, you could remember what that sensation was. And that was the kind of the starting point of our research. And now we've met once or twice a year for the past, I think probably 5 years. And we have a Google Drive that is just thick with materials. we've developed it into a little bit of a training. So like those videos that you saw before on Saturday in the morning, I would do the training, and we work from the idea that the state of the body is composed of the body engaged in a particular task with a particular texture, with a particular relationship to space and a particular relationship to time or rhythm. And so we train ourselves as we're moving to engage in all of those four, or just a couple of those at any one particular time. And yeah, that's, and then we've created a kind of a palette of these different textures or these different states. And then when I'm making a new work, I'll use those as a base, and I'll try and find new ones.
That's fantastic. That's really fascinating. It's amazing to see how it began with something like leaving the studio to experience something that you then brought back into the studio, and you sort of transformed the space that you were in with what you brought in from outside. And in a sense, I feel like even this film that you're making is bringing in so much into this little frame, and instead of being boxed in by it, you're kind of giving it a new life and a new shape and a new form. And it's quite exciting to see how all these elements just reflect differently in different parts of the movie.
Yeah. And then so now I've got this interest in the body as a terrain. So like, it's kind of like the muscles and the way you can actually like think of that. And then we were playing a little bit. I didn't really include it, but it's something to like, we were moving a light source over the body, so it created like the kind of, when you see time-lapse photography of the sun moving over the hills and stuff. So I think there's something interesting there that I want to keep pursuing.
Absolutely. I thought that was fascinating in the film, watching the different ways in which you use your body. So you had the zoomed out, full body engaged, moving across the space. You had your body flowing and like moving sort of within itself, and then you had it zoomed in, where you had things like water or light moving on you, and projections as well. And it was just interesting that in one sense you were the dancer, but you were also being danced upon.
Yeah, that's nice. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, it was very it was beautiful, because it was constantly challenging the idea of dance. And dance isn't just you doing things with your body, it's also you using your body to have things created and like effects. And
that's nice.
Yeah, I thought it was really interesting as well when you had the projections from different angles, and sort of creating, I think you described it as a 3D avatar. And
yeah. We only had one projector. Only had one projector to use for this time. So it kind of, the light kind of flattens the body, and anything that isn't directly hit becomes shadow, which is a certain effect. But I've seen it done. Well, I've been a part of I was a dancer for a choreographer who used two projectors coming from a diagonal, and then it creates a more like a three-dimensional. Like I'm thinking like an avatar, like a kind of what I imagine in my head. I don't know if it's possible. We won't really know until we go in with the actual equipment and the proper lighting, but a kind of like I'd like to actually literally embody water and air. So one thing I did notice was that when we used actual footage of rain and clouds, and it was less successful than when we used animated graphic kind of projections. So I think we're going to continue exploring with two, though I have a hunch we might end up at a less literal me being water place, and a bit more of, because there was this one white swirl that went up my body. I thought, and that's something that I want to, it's kind of water-like without actually being water. So I think that's something I will continue to explore.
Cool. Yeah, I also liked that one part where you had the multicolored projections, sort of rainbow colored projections, and towards the end, um, your eyes really stood out. And so there was that sense of there's this image, there's this visual, but there's also these eyes, which is, you know, it just sort of humanized that image and just brought it to life in its own unique way. Did you have specific thoughts about how you would bring different parts of the body into focus, or what your eyes meant in that scene?
So that kind of, yeah, I feel like as at this point in the process, I'm kind of now challenging that very original idea I had of the work of making it purely poetic and beautiful and about the visual, and wondering if maybe I do want to find some way to find the psychological a little bit in it. And so I thought that that was a little experiment. I thought that kind of zooming in on the eyes all of a sudden, yeah, the body ceased to be a representation of something or a terrain. And all of a sudden you went, oh yeah, this is actually a human being. I don't really know where I'm going to go with that. That's kind of where I am at the process right now. So I think I'm going to explore that a little bit. And also I was talking with Daniel, the composer, and he was also, he's like, I've got some instinct to like punctuate the sound with something industrial or electronic or like static. And I feel like that's maybe, yeah, the next kind of phase of this creative development is maybe kind of screwing a little bit with the beauty or contrasting the beauty a bit. Yeah.
Okay, cool. I liked your description of your creative process, and just when you described it as first starting out with being really excited about an idea, writing the grant applications, and then, you know, mucking around with it, loving it, and then hitting the I hate it moment, and then getting into the what am I doing space. And um, it was really interesting what you said about not liking sharing works in progress, being a bit of a perfectionist. How has that felt to you, to be, you know, halfway through your process, not at a stage where you feel like you fully know where it's going, and having to, you know, talk about it and uh, I guess open it up to the public eye? How does that sort of feel for?
Yeah, it was nerve-wracking. Absolutely. I think, and I would, you know, I think most artists would agree with me that it feels a little bit like, um, yeah, you're vulnerable. You have to be vulnerable in the creative process to kind of to find things, and so you know, every visual artist has sketchbooks full of stuff they would be horrified to show to other people, you know. And I think that's the same. You know, I have my creative process, and if I do a work in progress showing, it would normally be very late in the process. Once I'm quite certain of what I'm doing, and it would be to a very exclusive group of people who I'm inviting because, you know, I'm trying to pitch the work to them, or because there are other artists who I know and trust. So yeah, I was a bit nervous on Saturday. In fact, I came away from the stream and I noticed that I was quite stiff in my neck and my body. So I think was holding quite a lot of tension. It was a bit nerve-wracking. I mean, it was maybe a little bit helpful that everyone was kind of anonymous. I think that was also one of the reasons why I invited Carly to come. I think it would have been even more nerve-wracking if it had just been kind of me looking into the camera and talking about my work. It was nice having it in a kind of a bit more conversational manner that helped me calm a little bit. But yeah,
Yeah,
I'm glad I did it. I think it was good. It was, you know, and the other thing is that, like, part of my process is always to test stuff out on little groups of audiences. So it was nice to throw something out there and get some response back, and the feedback was really mostly warm, and I was really grateful for that.
yeah, I really loved being there, and it was beautiful to see, to talk about your work. knowing that it's at that stage in the process where it really could go a lot of different directions. And, you know, to see you still exploring, but also to see your sketches and to see where your final product comes from. It was so beautiful and so real. I really felt privileged to be there.
Yay, awesome.
There was a quote that you shared that I really liked. I was wondering if you could share it again. The Formula One quote.
Oh yeah, so Daniel Sant'Angeli, who was the program director of Midsummer and is now the artistic director of the Footscray Community Arts Centre. He was the dramaturg on my first work, Balladurung, and he said to me once that the creative process is like Formula One. You go around the track, you do a cycle of the track, and then you just keep repeating it, and each time you do it, you discover more and you fill in more, rather than trying to draw a picture by starting in one corner and then filling in the canvas. And that's always stuck with me. It takes the pressure off. It means it doesn't have to be perfect this time round. I know I'm going to come back to it later.
That's a beautiful, beautiful imagery, because, you know, like you said about even the film that you showed at the end of the live stream, you said that this was the first lap. And it was just beautiful to imagine that, you know, it's kind of like layers in a painting where you've done the first lap and then you do another lap, you fill in more things. And at what point, at what stage do you actually say this is complete? Is there ever a point where you say that?
No, you have a deadline, and wherever you're up to in the process, you go, okay, well, here it is. Opening night, yeah, it's never done. It's never done. But Balladurung, I've performed the show 120 times and I'm still working on it, right? Yeah.
Beautiful. That's wonderful. Thank you so much, Joel, for sharing all these thoughts and about talking us through your work and your process, and about how this year has been for you creatively. Is there anything else that you'd like to share with us about this work, especially about what the next step is? Because I'm sure, is it at Fringe that you're going to be presenting?
Well, that's the idea, though I would say that's looking less and less likely. I don't know if venues are going to be allowed to open in November, but that's the idea, is to present the work in November at Art Centre as a part of Fringe. Yeah, we'll just have to see, I guess.
Well, I'll be following along with interest, and I'm looking forward to seeing the film, seeing the immersive version whenever that happens. And yeah, thank you again for sharing so much, even at this early stage. And good luck with the rest of this process.
My pleasure. Thank you for such an erudite conversation.
Thank you.